I'm Alex, your host for today's episode of Touching Lives with Dr. James Merritt. Dr. Merritt has a great sermon ready as he is preaching a series on marriage and parenting. He's almost ready to go, but first let me tell you about a great resource available to you as you watch the broadcast. We've created a booklet called God's Design for Marriage and Families, and you can download this free booklet right now from our website at touchinglives.org. Thank you for joining us today, and now here's today's sermon from Dr. James Merritt.
We're in a series on parenting, and I was reading the other day something interesting, which I find to be true. Toward the end of the 20th century, there was a change that took place in our culture, both collectively and individually, and it was a big change. We transitioned from the hyper-individualistic mindset of the late 20th century, and we entered into what sociologists are now calling the social media explosion of the 21st century. And because of that, our relationships have become more numerous and yet more shallow at the same time than ever before. As a matter of fact, an author by the name of Robert Putnam, wrote a best-selling book entitled Bowling Alone, where he talks about the decline of relationships in the last part of the 20th century. He said, just as we entered into the new millennium, he said, this is what happened. Attendance at club meetings fell 58%. Family dinners declined 33%. Having friends visit went down by 45%. What social media has done is it's created this illusion and this thinking in our mind that we've got companionship, while at the same time it increases our ability to be isolated, to be separated from other people. For example, you may have hundreds of friends on Facebook. How many of them do you even know? You may have thousands of followers on Twitter without one single deep friendship or meaningful relationship. One scholar said, now we go online so we can be alone together. That's what social media has done. And yet, you talk to anybody. You can talk to successful business people. You can talk to coaches. You can talk to psychologists. You can talk to politicians. You know what every single one of them will tell you? They will say to you, success is all about relationships. How far you go in life will always be determined in great part by the relationships that you have. And if you don't believe that, I'll illustrate it to you. There was a man and I'm going to give you his name. He actually died 2 more years. He will be dead 100 years. And yet I will let you mention his name, and everybody in this room, I guarantee you, has heard of him. His name was John D Rockefeller. John D Rockefeller was the first billionaire in the history of the United States. When he died, he was by far and away the richest man in the world. He started a company called Standard Oil Company, and by the time he was finished building that company, they controlled 90% of all of the oil that was produced in the United States. Even today, if you go buy an Exxon or a Mobil or an Amoco or a Chevron, it is because of the vision and the ingenuity of John D. Rockefeller. And as I said again, he was by far and away the richest man in all of the world. When he died in 1918, his net worth was $1.5 billion. Let me put that in perspective. His net worth was the equivalent of 2% of the entire economic output of the United States in 1918. In today's dollars, he would be worth, are you ready for this? He would be worth today $341 billion. That would be 5 times what the richest man in the world is worth today. When John D. Rockefeller was asked the secret to his success, when they asked him, how did you go so far in life? How did you build such a great company? How did you become the richest man in the world? I want you to listen to what he said. He said, people will pay more for the ability to deal with people than any other ability under the sun. John D. Rockefeller said, if you know how to deal with people, and if you know how to find people who know how to deal with people, there really is no limit to what you can do. Now, we've all heard the old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, the truth is actually even deeper than that. It's not just what you know, and it's not just who you know. It's how well you know who you know that really counts. You can, quote unquote, know certain people, know who they are, be acquainted with them, and have some kind of a cordial relationship with them, and yet really not know them. Because every part of your life is built around relationships. And let me give you an example. If you want to have a good family, you got to have good family relationships. If you want to have a successful business, it's built on company relationships. If you've ever played on a football or a basketball team, you know this. Coaches will tell you what determines in the end whether or not a team wins a championship is not how good they are, not how good each individual player is, but there's a word they use. It's called chemistry. And every team that wins a championship always had good chemistry. What does that mean? They had good personal relationships. And the truth of the matter is, relationships can make you, and relationships can break you. Relationships can take you up. Relationships can tear you down. And if you don't think relationships are a big deal, think about this. Your eternal destiny is determined by whether or not you have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. You were born for relationships. Nobody was born to be, look, even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. Everybody was meant to be in a relationship. So we're concluding a series today, if you're a guest of ours, on parenting. And so as I was thinking about, what am I going to say in the last message? Right? How am I going to wrap this series up? I thought about what is the most important thing I'd want the parents to hear, and even the kids and the teenagers to hear. What's the most important thing I would want to share with them as I wrap this up? And it hit me. I don't think I could tell parents and teach parents and help parents in a greater way than to help you learn how to teach your kids how to have meaningful relationships. There was a man by the name of Solomon. He became one of the greatest kings in history. He wrote a letter to his son, and that letter is called Proverbs. And in this letter, he shares several secrets with his son on how to build the kind of relationships that will help you go where God wants you to go, help you do what God wants you to do, and help you to be what God wants you to be. So if you brought a copy of God's Word, smartphone, iPad, whatever you use, I want you to turn to Proverbs. It's right in the middle of your Bible, right after the book of Psalms. I want you to turn to Proverbs chapter 12. And here's what we're going to learn today. Solomon, when he's writing to his son, he says, son, you're going to encounter 3 types of people in your life. And by the way, let me just tell you this. You think of anybody you know right now, I promise you they fall into one of these 3 categories. Everybody, there's no exception. He said, son, you're going to encounter 3 types of people in your life. And how you relate to these 3 types of people will determine how successful in life you really are. Now, we're going to give names to these 3 kinds of people, all right? There are friends, there are foes, and there are fools. Now, I promise you, some of you are saying, yeah, I'm married to a fool. Okay, I get that. I want you to understand, everybody that you know falls into one of those categories, okay? They're friends, and we're going to talk about there's different level of friendships, but they're friends. They like you. You get along with them. They're foes. You don't like them. They don't like you. And then there are fools. Well, here's what Solomon taught his son, and this is what I want you to teach your children on how to relate to each one of these groups of people, because it's all about relationships, all right? First of all, Solomon says, teach your children to be loyal to their friends. Teach your kids to be loyal to their friends. Now, one of the things you learn as you leave the world of childhood, and you go into adulthood, is you learn just how valuable true friendships really are. Do you know why friendships are really valuable? Because they're really rare. Now, I hate to burst your bubble, but I want to let you know a dirty little secret, including me, so I'm with you in this. Nobody, listen to me right now, nobody has as many friends as you think you do. Nobody. You don't have as many friends. If you were to list all your friends, some of them are really not your friends. Nobody has as many true friends as they think. However, it's impossible to overestimate the value of a true friend. Now, we all desire for our kids to make good friends. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you got to teach your kids is this. If you want to teach your kids how to have good friends, first thing you got to teach them is to be a good friend. If you want your kids to have good friends, they've got to be good friends. You know why? You don't take friends. You make friends. And the way you teach your kids to make friends is to be a good friend. I've learned this in my life. I've learned it. It works every single time. If you make an effort to be friendly, you will not have a problem finding people who will be friendly with you. But let me just tell you this. Just the opposite of that is true. If you want people to like you, you've got to be likable. If you want people to be your friend, you've got to be a friend of them. If you don't, just don't be friendly. Psychologists, there was a group of psychologists, and they once asked a group of college students, this is so interesting. They said, we want you to jot down the initials of people that you don't like. Think of everybody in the world that you don't like and just jot down their initials. Now, there were some of the students, they could only think of one person. There were some students, they wrote down as many as 15 to 20 to 25 people they did not like. You know what was fascinating? You know what they discovered? You figured this out. The students that disliked the most people were the most disliked by other people. Wonder why? Because if you're not a likable person, you won't find a lot of people who will like you. So one of the things we try to teach our boys growing up was be likable, because the more likable you are, the more likely you are to like other people and to be liked by them. I read a classic years ago, and I would encourage you, this is an old book, and sometimes we think old books don't have a lot of truth. This old book is really a great book. It's a classic. I can tell you the author, many of you know what the book is. The author is Dale Carnegie. And Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read that book several years ago. And I don't necessarily agree with every single thing he says in the book, but it really is a great book on really how to have good relationships with people. Well, he said something in that book, and I was so impressed with it, I wrote it down, basically memorized it, and I've never forgotten it. Here's what he said. He said, you can make more friends in 2 months by being interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. So true. You know what I do, and I'll let you know a little secret if we ever get to go out to lunch or whatever. Whenever I'm trying to get to know someone, I've already got questions in my mind. I get them to talk about them. Do you know why? Because be honest, okay? Don't look at me like you're holier than I am, okay? Everybody's favorite subject is me, right? You're your favorite subject. Everybody loves to talk about themselves. As a matter of fact, I was reading the other day, there's a story about 2 of the greatest prime ministers in the history of England. One was Benjamin Disraeli. He was a conservative prime minister. And one was William Gladstone. That was his main political rival. He was a 4-time liberal prime minister. They were different in so many ways, but there was one thing that Gladstone could not stand about Disraeli. He was always the more popular. He was always the more well-liked. He always won by bigger margins. He always got more votes, and it just drove Gladstone nuts, and he never could figure out, why do people like him more than they like me? Well, a story may explain why. There was a young lady who was taken to dinner one evening by Gladstone, and the next evening she was taken by Disraeli. After she had dinner with both of them, somebody said to her, so what are your impressions of Disraeli and Gladstone? How would you compare the two? Here's what she said. She said, when I left the dining room after sitting next to Mr. Gladstone, I thought he was the most brilliant man in England. But after sitting next to Mr. Disraeli, I thought I was the most brilliant woman in England. See, it's a lot easier to be friendly than it is to be unfriendly, and it's a lot more profitable. However, more than just teaching your kids on how to be a friend, you got to teach your kids on how to choose friends. Because Solomon goes on now to say this, we're in Proverbs 12, verse 26. He says, the righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads him astray. Now that word choose is a really interesting word. It is the word that was used of a man that bought property, a real estate agent. And whenever a man would go to buy property, he would always go out to the land, he would examine the land, he would investigate the land, because he was asking himself a question. Is this land worthy of my investment? Is this land worthy of my money? Is this a piece of property that I ought to buy? And what Solomon was saying was, son, when you decide who you're going to have as a friend, you need to investigate them. You need to explore them. You need to learn how to choose the right type of friends. Now, I'm saying something that some of you think let me back up. I'm not saying what some of you think I'm saying. Let me explain what I mean. First of all, you got to understand what Solomon meant by a friend, because there are actually different levels of friendships. I'll give you an example. Here's a good example. I've got what I would say to be a good number of friends in our church. But not all of you are on the same level of friendship, as some others, because the deepest level is intimate friendship. Matter of fact, Solomon refers to that kind of friend a few chapters later. He says this in Proverbs 18, verse 24. One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but he says, you know what? There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Here's what Solomon said. He said, you know, we've all got friends, but we've got friends with little f's and we've got friends with capital F's. What he meant by that was, there are capital F friends, and these are the people you put in your inner circle. If you can imagine concentric circles, right? So we've got some quote unquote friends, they're out here more like acquaintances. Then we've got some friends, and they're more than acquaintances, okay, we kind of know them, we might go out with them every now and then. But then there are these close friends. There's these intimate friends. He said, this is the kind of friend I'm talking about. These are your intimates. These are the people who you seek out for advice. These are the people that you go to for counsel. These are the people you know are a good influence on you. These are the people you would trust with your wife and you would trust with your life. Now, let me tell you what I'm not saying, because this is big. What I am not saying is this. You do not want to teach your children, never associate with kids who may not believe what you believe. Don't associate with kids who don't live exactly the way that we live. Don't associate with kids who don't dress exactly like we dress. Don't associate and be friends with kids who don't go to church. That is not what I'm saying. Let me tell you why. We're never going to reach people outside the church if we don't have friendships with people outside the church. We're never going to reach unchurched people if we don't build relationships and have them as friends, and neither will your kids. We must be building friendships. We must be building relationships with people who don't believe in the Lord, who don't believe the Bible, who don't hold the same political views, who don't believe what we believe and look like we look and think like we think. Here's the key. You want your kids to be friends with kids that possibly they can reach for the church and reach for Christ. You say, okay, then how do you navigate that? Here's how you do it. You make sure that that child understands, if you're gonna be a friend with him, if you're gonna be a friend with her, that's fine. Under one condition, you're the one influencing them, they're not gonna be the ones influencing you. That's the key. That's the number one rule. You've got to be the influencer, because you've got to make sure that you teach your kids. I've told my kids this so many times. If you're not with the wrong person at the wrong place at the wrong time, you will not do the wrong thing. Now, I'll tell you something about friends. And if you're under the age of 18, I want you to know what I'm about to tell you. If you're under the age of 18, listen to this. Let me tell you why it's so important you be careful in the friends that you choose. Because your friends can get you into more trouble in an hour than you can get yourself into in a lifetime. I'm telling you. There are kids in jail today that would not be in jail today if they had not chosen the wrong kind of friends. So you need to teach your kids how to be a friend. You got to teach your kids how to choose a friend. Then you got to teach your kids how to keep of friends. Because remember what Solomon said? He said a real friend sticks closer than a brother. That word stick, interesting word. It's a medical term. It refers to how skin sticks to the bone. Now think about that. Solomon said, if you're going to be a real friend to somebody and they're going to be a real friend to you, you've got to have the understanding through thick and thin, good and bad, whether things are sweet or things are sour. I am going to stick to you, because there's one thing that proves you've got a true friend. You tell me who you think your true friends are. Let me ask you this one question. Do you have even an ounce of doubt that if things go south in your life, if you screw up, if you make a big mistake, if you really do something you shouldn't do, will they stick by you? Doesn't necessarily they'll approve of what you did. Will they stick by you? Will they walk into your house when the whole world has just walked out? Because let me tell you something about my best friends that I know about my best friends. They never have an interest in being a prosecuting attorney for me. They want to be my defense attorney.
It's been a great sermon so far, and Dr. Merritt's final points are coming up. Before we return to the message, I'd like to share with you a little bit about who we are. Touching Lives exists to touch the lives of the lost and enrich the faith of the found, and we accomplish these goals by the grace of God and through the generosity of people just like you. I'd like to invite you to partner with us financially because together we can continue reaching the people all over the world for Jesus. Donating is safe and easy. Go to our website at touchinglives.org and look for the donate button near the top of the homepage. If you enroll as a recurring monthly donor with a monthly gift of $50 or more, we have a very special gift for you, an official Touching Lives partner coin that we hope will remind you to pray for the lost each time you see it. No matter if you're able to give or not, please pray for us as we minister to people all over the world. Your prayers are worth more money than you could ever send. And now let's get back to Dr. Merritt's sermon.
Dr. Billy Graham was a friend to many presidents, beginning with Harry Truman. He was a friend to every president we've had since then. He was a friend of Bill Clinton's. And Dr. Graham tells the story that when it became clear that Bill Clinton had lied under oath and had indeed had this improper relationship with a 21-year-old White House intern, 2 months after that scandal broke, Billy Graham was on the Today Show. And so the first thing they asked Dr. Graham when he sat down, they said, okay, so what do you think about President Clinton and what do you think about the way he's conducted himself in office? And Dr. Graham only said 4 words. And the 4 words were, I forgive the president. That's all he said, I forgive the president. Dr. Graham said later, that one word, forgive, brought him an avalanche of ugly letters. People could not believe he would just say, I forgive the president, but it got better. A few weeks later, he, along with the president, they were invited to New York to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Time magazine. Well, Dr. Graham was supposed to sit at a different table than President Clinton. The guy that was supposed to sit next to President Clinton was baseball player Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio publicly repudiated the president and said, I will not sit next to that man. And Billy Graham, quietly behind the scenes, said, I will sit next to the president. When they asked Dr. Graham after the dinner was over, why would you sit with the president? Again, he only said 4 words. I am his friend. Teach your kids to be loyal to their friends. Second thing, teach your kids to be loving to their foes. Be loving to their foes. Now, one of the things you need to teach your children, and you better teach them early, everybody makes enemies. Everybody makes enemies. Let me tell you something. I've been to funerals, and I've heard people say this. I've heard this probably 8 or 12 times. I don't know of an enemy this person had. You know what I always think to myself? You don't know everybody. You give me some time, I'll find one. Everybody in this room, listen, if you have convictions that you believe in and the courage to stand up for them, you're going to make enemies. If you take a stand for Jesus Christ in this day and age we live in, you're going to make enemies. If you stand up and dare to tell the truth, you're going to make enemies. The issue is not, are we going to make enemies? The issue is not, are people going to do us wrong? The issue is not, are people going to dislike us? The answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. The issue is, how are we going to respond to them? So Solomon says to his son, he says, son, let me give you a couple of pieces of advice on how to handle people that don't like you, people that oppose you, people that say nasty things about you, people that do you wrong. He said, number 1, never go down to their level. Because that's the very first thing we're all tempted to do. When somebody hurts us, we want to hurt them back. Somebody says something bad about us, we want to say something bad about them back. We want to kind of get down, to their level. Well, here's another great piece of advice this king gave to his son. Here's what he said. Do not say, I'll pay you back for this wrong, because isn't that the first thing we want to say? Somebody does this wrong. What's the first thought that comes to our mind? I'll get you back. You just wait. I'm coming after you, right? I'll pay you back. He says, no, wait for the Lord. He'll avenge you. There are so many people today, their lives have been ruined. There are people sitting in this room right now. You're watching by TV or you're listening by a computer. This is you. Your life's a mess. Your life is a wreck. Your life is ruined. You know why it's been ruined? It's not been ruined by what somebody did to you. It's been ruined by the way you've responded. It's been ruined by the way you've acted. It's been ruined by the way you have reacted. Because there are some people, their entire life is built around, how can I pay this guy back? How can I make him pay? How can I make him sorry for what he or she did to me? And you know why that's really so is sad because for the most part, it's an exercise in futility. Let me tell you why. Number one, most people who want to pay people back never get the chance to pay them back. That's why they get frustrated. They just, they can't find a way to do it. Then, if they do get to pay them back, you know what they find out? They find out that the payback winds up costing more than the payback was worth. And then the third thing they find out too late is that even if you do pay them back, it doesn't take care of the hurt they did to you. It doesn't do anything to solve the bitterness in your heart. As a matter of fact, let me tell you what's even sadder than this. When you allow yourself to stoop to the level of a person who's done you wrong and you do wrong to them, you wind up doing something worse to yourself than the harm that they did to you. Here's why. If you've got any kind of conscience at all, any kind at all, when you stoop down to the level of the person who hurt you and then you hurt him or hurt them, you know what now? You know what's true about you now? Now, not only do you live with what they did to you, now you got to live with what you did to them. So it doesn't pay, it just absolutely doesn't work. You know, we've all heard that two wrongs don't make a right. Let me kind of tweak that a little bit. One wrong does not turn another wrong into a right. But here's what you'll find. As you uncover the layers of a response like this, it just gets worse and deeper, because if you're a follower of Jesus today, and I'm talking to somebody in this room, I don't know who you are, but you're bitter, you're upset, you're angry, the spouse walked out on you, somebody left you holding the bag, somebody turned their back on you, whatever it was, somebody betrayed you, you've never gotten over it, you're mad, you're angry, you're upset. You think, I know what my problem is bitterness. No, your problem's deeper than that. Your problem's not bitterness. Your problem is unbelief. So what do you mean? Well, let's listen to the last part of this verse. He said, wait for the Lord. Why? Wait for the Lord. He will avenge you. He will avenge you. See, there's only one who has the right to pay anyone back for a wrong, and there's only one who knows how to pay back in the right way, and that's God. And God makes a promise to us. He says, look, don't you say, I'll get you back. Don't you say, I'll pay you back. Let me tell you why God says, that's my job. I'll do that. You've got my word. Nobody that does wrong ever gets away with it. I'll take care of them. For every action, there's a reaction. I'll see to it. For every kick, there's a kickback. And I'll see to it. I'll take care of the person that did you wrong. You just trust me. So when somebody does us wrong, we automatically think, all right, I've got one job in life now to pay that person back. I've got one job in life to make sure that I've avenged myself. God says, no, that's not your job. Your job's not to pay them back. Your job is to trust them with me, so you can stay above their level, so you can keep your heart clean, so you can go to bed at night with a peaceful conscience knowing, well, maybe they did wrong to me, but I've not done wrong to them. Maybe they did what was wrong, but I did what was right. Because if you never go down to their level, if you stay on God's level, you kill them with kindness, you get a chance, you love them. Because listen to what Solomon says to his son now in Proverbs 25. And by the way, some of you are going to like part of this verse. He says, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. Some of you don't like that. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. You don't like that either, but you're going to love this part. In doing this, you'll heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. And you say, nah, I'm into that. I like that part. I know some of you are thinking right now, man, there's nothing I'd love more than to put coals on his head and fry his brains like an Oscar Mayer wiener. I'm all into that. Well, here's the problem. That's not what that means. Sorry, it's not what that means, okay? So hang with me. Don't slam your Bible shut yet, just listen. Back in Bible days, the way that homes were heated, the way meals were cooked, was most everybody had what would look like kind of like an outdoor grill. And you would put coals under that grill, and that's how you'd heat food, and that's how you'd warm your house. Well, the problem was poor people would run low on coal, and they didn't have enough money just to go out and to buy coal. So what poor people would do is they would take containers and they would put them on their heads, and they would go to the homes of the wealthier people, who many of them lived in second-story homes. And what they would do is they would walk under the streets. They might make a noise, or they might even say, cry out the word coal or whatever to let people know they were there. They would walk under these windows, and these rich people would reach out their window, and they would put coals on the container on the top of that person's head. So at the end of his journey, he would arrive back to his house with this big pile of burning coals so he could build a fire, he could cook his food, he could keep his family warm, and keep his house heated. So in other words, what Solomon was saying was, this was an act of generosity. This was an act of courtesy. And what he was telling his son was, look, son, when somebody does you wrong, you don't wrong them back. When somebody hurts you, you don't hurt them back. Here's what you do, son. You fill them with forgiveness. You kill them with kindness. Because I'll tell you what I have learned. I've learned this. This has happened to me. If I had the time, I would tell you a story. She knows who I'm talking about. I could tell you of a story of a man in my former church because of something that happened he didn't like. He absolutely hated my insides. I mean, hated them. Hated them. And I don't even have time to tell the story. I'll just tell you, he used to sit about where you're sitting right there. So thank God you're not him. But he sat right, raise your hand, raise your hand. He sat right where you sat every Sunday. And this was his deal right here, every Sunday. He'd sit right there. He'd stare at me. He'd growl. Dribble would be coming off his chin. He hated my guts. I think the guy was rabid. Hated me. I'd make a point to try to shake his hand every Sunday. He wouldn't even shake my hand. Make a point every Sunday. And I just kept loving on him. He wound up coming to my office, asked for forgiveness, became one of the best friends I had, went to Israel with us. You know what I'm talking about. If you will fill your enemies with forgiveness, and if you will kill them with kindness, many times you can turn an enemy into a friend. So, teach your kids to be loyal to their friends. Teach your kids to be leery, or to be loving with their foes. All right, last thing. Teach your kids to be leery with fools. Now watch this. This is the most important part of the message. Solomon said, he said, you know, there are certain kinds of people that you need to teach your kids to handle with care. These are the people, by the way, let me tell you what a fool is. A fool is the kid that will get your kid in trouble. A fool is the quote-unquote friend that will get your child in trouble. They're called fools. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. Solomon actually uses 3 different Hebrew words for the word fool. One word refers to a hard-headed person who thinks, I don't need any advice. That's a fool. Another word refers to a thick-headed person who won't even listen to advice. He says, I don't even want to hear what you got to say. And then the third term refers to an empty-headed person. He'll listen to what your advice is, then he won't take it, and he'll turn around and do just the opposite, and he'll live a foolish lifestyle. Now, here's who a fool is. So when I tell you I'm going to use a term for a fool, then you know who he's talking about. A fool is what we call the wrong crowd. We've all warned our kids, don't hang out with the wrong crowd. What we call the wrong crowd, he calls fools. Now, do you know what makes the wrong crowd the wrong crowd? What makes the wrong crowd is they won't take advice from the right crowd. They won't listen. They think they've got it all to figure out. They're going to go their way. And these are people, and you know who they are. It doesn't take long. They're known out there. Your kids know who they are. The school teachers know who they are. The administrators know who they are. Many times the police know who they are. They are intent and they're bent on being at the wrong place, doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. They're not interested in pulling people up to a higher level. All they care about is pulling people down to a lower level. And Solomon says, a fool is someone who won't listen to godly advice. He won't learn godly counsel. He will not live according to godly wisdom. So what do you teach your kids? How do you teach your kids to respond to fools? All right, here's a piece of advice that Solomon gives. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffer harm. In other words, Solomon said, there are certain people, certain kids, and by the way, none of this is going to work, parents, if you're not involved in the life of your kids. Okay, if your absentee dad and mom can't help you, you got to get involved. You got to kind of know what's going on. Solomon says there are certain kids, and your radar will go up, your antenna will go up, and these are the kids you're going to have to teach your kids. You just got to avoid that kid. You just cannot really develop a relationship with that kid. Because I used to tell my boys something all the time. I said, guys, only a fool hangs around with fools. Only a fool hangs around with fools. So to repeat something I said earlier in a different way, I used to tell my son something. In fact, I've said it to him. Joshua's back there. He'll tell you. I got sick of me telling this. I said, guys, look, living right's not that hard. It's not, you don't have to go to MIT or Georgia Tech. Well, not Georgia Tech. You don't have to go to MIT or University of Georgia. You don't have to go there to learn what I'm about to tell you. Living right is not that hard. If you're not in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong person, you can't do the wrong thing. I cannot tell you how many pastors I've had to talk to in my ministry. I can't tell you. How many pastors blew it, lost their ministry, destroyed their reputation, killed their marriages, crushed their families, tore their church apart, not because they were evil or wicked, because they weren't. Not because this is what they intended to do. They didn't. It is because they are foolish. Every time I talk to these pastors, I find this is true 100% of the time. You know why they blew it? They were in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong person. That's why they did the wrong thing. That's why I told you before, I don't meet women alone. I don't go to lunch with women alone. I don't counsel women alone. Why? I'm not going to be in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong person that might tempt me to do the wrong thing. And there are times you're going to have to teach your kids, you just can't go into that relationship. You've got to drop that relationship. There was a man that called a telephone number one time. It was the wrong number, but he loved the message that he got. Here's what the recording said. I'm not available right now, but I thank you for caring enough to call. I'm making some changes in my life. Please leave a message after the beep. If I don't return your call, you're one of the changes. Sometimes you got to sit down with your child. Listen, they may not like it. They may not care. They may think you're being hypersensitive. They maybe make you think you're being over-judgmental. That's okay. You've got an antenna they don't have. You've got a wisdom they don't have. You've got a sixth sense they don't have. And there may be times you got to say, you know what? You got to make a change here. You can't do this. Now, let me tell you why this is so important. We're going to be done. This is why this is so crucial. The reason why I titled my message, It's All About Relationships, is this. Relationships are so important, not just for earth. They're important for eternity. Because God's Word says our eternal destiny is going to be determined by whether or not we have a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ. You can't even get into heaven without the right relationship. You know, it really is true. I can tell every one of you in this room whether you're going to heaven or not. It's all about not just who you know, but how well you know who you know. And the first thing and the most important thing we ought to be teaching our children is that the most important relationship you will ever have, son or daughter, is that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Because when it comes to knowing God and loving God and spending eternity with God, it's all about a relationship with the Son of God, who, by the way, wants to have a relationship with us so badly, he leaves heaven, comes to earth, born of a virgin, lives a sinless life, dies on a cross, comes back from the dead. Why? So he could live in us. And we could have a relationship with him that is forever and ever and permanent and will never, ever end. So, here's what I'm saying to parents. And this is what I'm saying to grandparents. And I'm both of those now. If I could wrap all this series up, and I said, okay, there's one thing that these parents will do if I ask them to do it. They won't do 2 or 3 or 4, but they'll do one. Here's how I'd wrap this up. If you want to raise the kind of children that you can make sure you'll never have to go back there, lead your kids to have a personal, real, vibrant, number one relationship with Jesus Christ. And number 2, lead your children to learn how to shine their spiritual flashlight so they can lead other kids and teenagers to have a personal relationship as well. Because I want to tell you, I said this earlier in a message, and I won't say it again. It doesn't matter if we leave a better world for our children if we don't leave better children for our world. And when I talk about better kids, I'm not talking about smarter kids. I'm not talking about more successful kids. I'm not talking about more athletic kids. What I mean by better is kids who get it, kids who understand that the most important part about me is my relationship to the God that made me. And the most important job I'll ever have in this life is to make sure that my friends and people that I know have that same personal relationship as well. And if that happens, a revival will break out in this nation that the whole world cannot contain.
We are so glad you tuned in here on the Touching Lives digital channel, and we hope you enjoyed the sermon today. Be sure to click and follow this page, and feel free to leave any comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts from today's message. Look for a new episode to be posted on this channel each Sunday, but in the meantime, check out our free resources at touchinglives.org. Thank you so much for watching today. I'll see you right here next time for another episode of Touching Lives with Dr. James Merritt.
Teaching people everywhere who Jesus is and why they need Him. This program is sponsored by Touching Lives Ministries and is made possible by the grace of God and your faithful prayers and gifts.